This video was inspired by the creative work of Reddit user Sad in Oceania. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be active anymore, but the taken hamlet of Semblance isn't their only work, so suffice to say, if this video sparks your curiosity, there's a link in the link place to their Reddit account, where they have kindly put some excellent work for you to peruse for free. I was introduced to this Reddit user in this Reddit post, which immediately caught my attention. Even the blurb is evocative. A small hamlet, the victim of some unknown or forgotten calamity, had been taken, disappeared. And now, sometimes, it comes back. Not necessarily to the place it once stood, but anywhere, everywhere. The wormy tendrils of this eldritch place latch on to many crooks, crannies, caves, and corners. If you find the world you live in too mundane and inhospitable, or if there are too many prying eyes who care about something terrible you've done, why not take a quick jaunt to Semblance, where all are required to wear masks or else, and where none could care less about the things you used to do, or the person you used to be. Semblance is an especially useful kind of location. It's true in Dungeons & Dragons, and most role-playing games really. If you have an interesting locale, once you've prepared it, it can be deployed anywhere. Only once your players have actually encountered it, only when you need to deploy it and show it to them, does it go on the map properly. Until then, it exists in a kind of hyperspace, the DM's back pocket, so to speak, where you can use it if and when you need to. But what's very flexible and fun about Semblance is that this is not just true as it is for all locations you might prepare, but it's something that's baked into the very essence of the place. You can deploy Semblance anywhere, even places your players have been to before, because the portals that appear to it can appear anywhere and everywhere. They can even open up right before your player's eyes. I used Semblance out of necessity. In my second ever session as a DM of a real campaign, the party was exploring an ancient dwarven tomb, each looking for something different inside. I had underestimated the power of the ghouls, which brought the level 2 party to death's door multiple times. One player in particular had never played D&D before, and though the first session had caught his imagination with the whimsy and the adventure, being torn to shreds before his first turn gave him a real fear of fighting. I intended it to be a challenge, but not a bloodbath. The players were now too afraid to venture any further into the only piece of content I had actually prepared for them properly. What was supposed to be a game had become a frustrating slog of twisting anxiety, and the campaign looked suddenly precariously placed. So along came Semblance to save me. When a masked woman burst forth from an eerie orange portal, only to be savaged by another pack of ghouls in the tomb, the party found them easier to deal with when their attention was on the easy meat, and not them. And when a strange, one-eyed, lanky figure came out of that same portal, thanked the party for saving the woman, and invited them back to Semblance to enjoy their reward, well, they were very intrigued and excited, and the evening, or perhaps even the entire campaign, was saved. Semblance is a good example of capital W weird fiction. The quirky, the magical, the sublime, and the twisted all mingled into one definitively weird cocktail. So, let's take a look. Semblance doesn't necessarily have a cohesive aesthetic. When making this video, this actually surprised me. In my mind, Semblance was stricken and diseased yellow. The pavement and the stone was like orange flesh, and the sky was a dead, crusty yellow color. It radiated a diseased energy, but aside from the fact that many Semblance's buildings are ramshackle, and that it's ringed by an impassable wall, and that the tower in its center is sulfur yellow, and that the sky is perpetually streaked with red lightning, how Semblance looks is entirely up to you. Aside from those 4 details, everything else is as you like it. I found Semblance very wormy and earthy and diseased, but your Semblance could be much more prim and proper, at least on the surface. What Semblance is more concerned with than aesthetics is its collection of buildings and gates. There are 3 entrances into Semblance: the Land Gate, the Water Gate, and the Worms Gullet. The Land Gate is the simplest. Rennie Tamar, bearing a mask carved into a laugh, is the one who stalks the 6 goat heads that adorn this gate. The goats aren't just for show. When someone with a lawful alignment approaches, Rennie locks the gate. "No amount of laws have done this here town any good," he'll say. "Off with you." So, if you have a lawful member of the party, the water-bound gate might be more fruitful. What it asks differs depending on the moon and its phase, in accordance with this handy chart. Depending on the lunar cycle, you might have to offer anything from a pint of blood to a spell scroll, or you might not be able to enter or leave Semblance at all. Barring that, the third entrance, for the most desperate or the most devoted, is the Worms Gullet. To say that it's a stone passage carved to resemble a giant worm is misleading. It's a giant worm magically illusioned so that it resembles a stone passage. Devotees of the conqueror worm make pilgrimage here by choice, and others do so at their own peril, because to venture through this eerie magical darkness is to risk hearing the whispers that impart upon you the 12 foul words of the conqueror worm itself. I think that speaks to the deeply interesting and arbitrary nature of Semblance. For some DMs, this might seem too random, but to me it really evoked a kind of old-fashioned mysticism. Mix the ingredients in the right proportions under the light of the right moon. No rhyme, no reason, just compliance with forces too strange to understand. Semblance itself is a little less demanding, but no less mercurial than its entrances and exits. Everyone in Semblance, and I do mean everyone, wears a mask or covers their face somehow, and it's no secret as to why. Semblance is haunted by those who lurk, a collection of wraiths who have a deep-seated anger, or perhaps a hunger, to all those with faces. If the wraiths manage to knock you down, they don't kill you. Instead, they steal your mouth, your nose, and your eyes, leaving only taut skin behind. The victims can no longer see or eat by normal means, but they gain a 15-foot blind sight, and no longer need to breathe or eat at all. Those who lurk cannot be satisfied. Once the face is stolen, they will flock to the victim like moths to a flame, draining their life until there is truly nothing left. But so long as you dutifully cover your face, these wraiths are no real concern. And having a town where no one is interested in seeing your face surely has its advantages. Aside from the unusual habits of the people of Semblance, there are plenty of other landmarks of note to speak of. And interestingly, Semblance is a very difficult place to map. Though no one has much difficulty getting from one place to another, if you tried to chart out the space on paper, you'd quickly tie yourself into knots. The angles just don't quite add up. Siriazer's Plaza is where Semblance's politics takes form, and where the Parliament lives. The Parliament is a single person whose mind houses a copy of each living citizen in Semblance. Freed from the hassle of bothering to participate in local politics, the citizens of Semblance are free to do what they please, safe in the knowledge that their copy in the Parliament will represent their interests fairly. The Parliament neither eats nor sleeps and seems to live forever, but even he struggles to recall the great man that made him, Siriazer. When I ran Semblance for my players, any new arrivals to the taken hamlet became official citizens after their 7th night within its walls, so a copy of them would have to be imbued in the Parliament at that time. Uneager to have this happen to them, the party conspired to be out of Semblance before the 7th day. Other interesting locations are the House of Flesh and Shaping, a pleasure house, party place, and, when I ran Semblance, a regular old inn too. Run by the great procuress, she, like most in Semblance, have little need for money, so she takes her payment in blood. She might be a vampire. When I ran Semblance, my players easily befriended the great procuress, learning that her name was Molly, and when a masked assassin stole her face covering to leave her to be killed by the wraiths, the party risked everything to protect her. Since then, a jolly blonde woman with a toothy grin has frequently been the host of many of my inns across many different campaigns. Her name is always Molly, and she's always the keeper of some grave secret or other. The House of Flesh and Shaping is also home to the Flesh Shapers, unsurprisingly, a group of mysterious mages and alchemists and maybe more, who are experts in the art of growing and grafting flesh of all sorts for all sorts of purposes. Maybe your players could even avail of their services? Mine were much too afraid to, though of course they took other risks. Anyhow, the House of Hunger and Harvest is next on our list, a large indoor marketplace where everything is free and none of it looks healthy. Those who work the stalls are strange, almost boneless creatures wearing animal masks, and typically they speak only one word: eat. Of course, to eat too much of the free food provided is to risk having your own flesh betray you for a time as punishment. For instance, when the fighter of my party, Artio, went to get enough food for both herself and her ailing paladin friend, Ike, the House of Hunger and Harvests mistook her charity for greed and transformed her into a pig for the guts of 2 days, releasing her from this flesh prison after curfew, and without a mask. The Tower of the Worm is visible from anywhere in Semblance, though walking in its direction mightn't always be the fastest way to get to it. More of a spike than a tower proper, and tinged a dirty sulphurous yellow, the top is constantly obscured by the consistent red lightning that never leaves Semblance. Distant peals of laughter can be heard at the bottom, where the worshippers of the conqueror worm often congregate, most too afraid to enter the tower's humble entrance and investigate the upper echelons. For those that do almost never return. They are not missed, though, for their voices are added to the laughter. When Vliza, the young woman my players rescued in the tomb, was tried for her crimes, though what those crimes might have been my players never did manage to screw up the courage to investigate, she was tied to this tower without a mask. She called for help desperately as the night and the wraiths descended, but none of my players quite had the courage to help her. Poor girl. When in Rome, I suppose. Lastly, and perhaps most iconically for my campaign, is the House of Milk and Honey. If you read through the document, I think that if you're anything like me, this is the bit that's going to really excite you. A strange, mostly empty place, littered with a carpet of insects, at times so deep that they must be waded through. A large central room with 6 altars, each with a cup, is the main event of this building. This room is the domain of the Nothic, which was formerly the great wizard Celizar. He grinds the bugs to make the milk in each cup, and helpfully tells the players the price for drinking from each. Each gives a remarkable boon, and a terrible cost. This was the room that radically redefined my game forever. Here, Ike, the lawful good paladin who had just lost her home and her master, drank from the deadly cold of an Ngul, gaining the ability to cast Ice Storm, a 4th level spell, at the cost of losing her empathy and humanity for a time whenever she did. So enraptured was she by this extra power that she began to worship the conqueror worm, and heeded its twisted message, becoming a vengeance paladin. And my bard, Pierre, had a familiar, a mouse called Jean-Luc, who decided to drink from the chalice of unholy wormlight without asking any of the party what they felt about it. He gained access to a twisted version of the Guiding Bolt spell to better help his master, at the cost of becoming a harbinger of pests and plagues and an instrument of that same conqueror worm. My favourite of these 6 trades one can make is the Gift of Knowledge Unknown, where Sad in Oceania, the writer of Semblance, gives us, and perhaps whatever fool would drink from such a cup, our most tempting morsel as to what's happened in this strange place. Celizar and the conqueror worm both play a role, but the grim particulars, as with much of Semblance, are left to us, the DM. So that's what I love about this work. It's grim, it's vague, it's dark, but it's also got a layer of whimsy and charm to it all. It can afford to be this mercurial because it doesn't have to make the strictest kind of sense that we need most of our games to. Semblance is clearly already a weird and alien world. A little bit of moon logic isn't going to go awry. If you do plan on running Semblance in your game, which I can't recommend highly enough, please check the link in the link place, and don't be afraid to be inspired. Sad and Oceania themselves gives us a great toolkit of ways to use Semblance, most of which don't serve to instruct us, but to inspire us. For example, a diplomat returns from Semblance, their face is missing. We're given no hint here as to how to make this actionable for our players, but if your mind works anything like mine, you're already involuntarily twisting the idea in that mind to inject some horror and mystery into your game. When I ran Semblance, I leaned hard into the payment in blood idea. In my mind, everyone in Semblance used blood as currency, and they met Harold, a haberdasher who traded blood for headwear and secrets for secrets. The halfling bard Pierre gave up the secrets of the halfling language to Harold, in exchange for learning Sylvan to further his studies into the Fae, a decision he deliberated for some time over because with Harold you never knew where the information you gave might end up. Or the bloodsmith, Varalka, who would use your blood to infuse your weapons and give them semblances of dark magic, all for free. Just provide the materials. It wasn't easy to make it through Semblance with all of your blood in your veins. Ike the paladin gave some for her blood sword, although she wouldn't be able to enjoy it for too long, and Pierre the bard had his blood infused into his lute strings. These small things allowed me to keep the magic and the mystery of Semblance with the players after they had left. Another aspect of Semblance and its multiplanar nature was that many strange peoples lived there. The players encountered sea folk, a fallen angel, and even a small community of mind flayers, trading with Harald for secrets to keep nourished and hiding from the prying eyes of the Gith. I think every game could benefit from a weird excursion to Semblance, and there are many ways you can use it. Is it encroaching like a plague onto another desperate town? Do entrances begin to grow naturally in a nearby wood? Does it appear as a ghostly apparition on a hill when the moon is just right? And when your players arrive in Semblance, what there catches their attention? What weird delight are they most interested in? Whatever it is, lean into it. Don't be afraid to give them wonders beyond their wildest dreams. Such things inevitably lead to interesting nightmares. In this video, we introduced and ran through the highlights of Semblance, the Wormtown from nowhere, and used my players as a case study to see what kind of mischief and misfortune might go on there. This video was made with the support of the wonderful and generous Talaris, and if you'd like to join his hallowed and distinguished name, there's a link to our Patreon in the link place. Safe home, comrades!